What's the cruelest thing someone ever said to you that you still remember word for word? A lot of these stories are hard to hear, but one stands out. My parents told me as a kid that what I wanted or thought didn't matter because I didn't bring money into the house. They said, "Do you know how much it cost us? Until you start working and bringing money in, your opinion doesn't matter and we don't give a crap how you feel." Why the heck did they even adopt a kid if that was going to be their attitude? I lost respect for them right then and there and never gave a damn what they thought after that. When they threw me out of the house to teach me a lesson, hoping I'd come crawling back and be humble, I just left and never looked back. I don't even know if they're still alive. Story 2. When I was in my early 20s, I reconnected with my first love after we'd broken up a year or so before. We'd been seeing each other for a few months again. We were in bed together, in the afterglow and all that. I was snuggled up on his chest, drifting to sleep. He chose that exact moment to say, "You know I never want a relationship with you again, right? This is so messed up. The feeling they gave me will never completely disappear, even though it was a long, long time ago and I've moved on." The sheer coldness in his voice in that moment broke something in me. Story 3. My biological parent was a master of cruelty and still lives rent-free in my head, despite decades of therapy. Some of their classics. "You're big enough and ugly enough to look after yourself now." This was their catchphrase anytime I needed something, starting about age 9. "One day you'll say that to some man and he'll knock your teeth out." This was another catchphrase they used right through my teens. "You could be so pretty if you could just afford to fix your nose." They said this to me at age 18 when I was excelling academically, had great friends, and was starting to have self-confidence. Now I know why you turned out like that. They said this when I found out they'd been lying about who my biological father was my whole life. There were plenty of others, but those were all the most memorable. Story 4. This wasn't intentional or meant to be cruel, and as an adult, I understand it. My parents were law and divorced, and my mom had a fight and broke up with her boyfriend at the time. She was crying, sitting on the stairs. I remember this vividly because of how it hit me. It said, "Nobody loves me." I hugged her and said, "I love you, Mommy." I was probably between 6 and 8 years old at the time. She replied, "I know, it's not the same." The way it hit my kid brain was that my love wasn't worth anything to my mom, and I took that deep to the heart. I don't know exactly when I came to understand it, but it was definitely a few years before I could process the contextual difference between her seeking romantic love versus familial love. It's funny because now we can laugh about the misunderstanding. I know fully what she meant, and I know she didn't reject my love. But the residue of how hard that hit me, I can still feel how it felt at the time if I think about it. Story 5. In elementary school, I tried to join a hacky sack circle and missed, which angered a kid I had never really had problems with, but who was known for being a schmuck. He pushed me against a brick wall. This was witnessed by a lot of kids and teachers' aides, so I was sent to the nurse's office and he was reprimanded. Later, when I rejoined my class after getting an ice pack and Advil, I saw him sitting at his desk with his head in his arms, crying. The teacher saw me looking at him and said to me, "This is all your fault." In my adult mind, I pieced together that this kid had a really rough home life and was most likely crying because he knew he was going to get harmed by his dad when he got home. That teacher is still a piece of crap, though. Screw you, Mrs. Scott. Story 6. In middle school, a classmate who was a bully and whom I strongly disliked told me that my parents never loved me and that they said I was a mistake who never should have been born. He also told me that everyone in class hated me and showed me a list of people who supposedly signed a document saying that they hated me. The document was in handwriting. Up until that point, I had no concept that parents would say such things to their kids, as this was never said to me. I was born in an era where birth control wasn't widely available and would have been difficult to get, even if one were married. As I got older, I met others who had parents who said these terrible things to them. I knew that what he was saying was a lie and that he wanted to upset me. I looked at him and just laughed, telling him that I knew he hadn't talked to my parents because they were divorced and my dad lived in another state. I also pointed out that the document of hate was in his handwriting. He was really taken aback by my reaction. He wanted me to be upset, to cry perhaps, but I was having none of it. I remember later telling my grandmother about this, and she told me that for someone like him, you really have to feel sorry for him, even if he doesn't deserve it. She said that most likely this was what his own parents said to him, and sadly, there were people who had children they didn't want, and if given the choice, probably wouldn't have had them. Story 7. No, you don't like that. On the surface, that's not a cruel thing to say at all. Might even sound like someone is protecting you. But it has turned me into an almost 40-year-old who has no idea how to pick things out for myself. This is because every time I got excited about something, someone, usually my mom or a longtime toxic friend, would convince me it wasn't me. They would say it wasn't my color, my typical flavor palette, or my style. Except it was. It always was. I just honestly thought they had my best interests at heart, not just their own preferences for me. Story 8. 2 random guys at 2 random times in my life called me a dog. To be clear, I'm not a beauty. I've always been on the pudgy side. I wear glasses and have mousy hair that frizzes. No one has ever tried to pick me up. That being said, both times it was unexpected, so it hurt more. In high school, I was opening my locker when a boy came up to my right, shoved me, and said, "Out of my way, dog." To the surprise of everyone, the football coach was walking by and grabbed the boy, spun him around, and roared at him. "What did you say?" As a very shy person, I ran off at that point. The second time, I was riding in my boyfriend's convertible Camaro, wearing a sundress. We just left the house for an afternoon at the beach. couple of men were walking along the street and one of them yelled, "Great car, but your girlfriend's a dog." Wow, just so effing unnecessary. Story 9. This story is kind of cruel, but also kind of funny. My niece is autistic and very high on the spectrum. She is verbal, but only to an extent. She went to her little brother's preschool Christmas show. After his performance, right before the clapping began, my niece stood up on her chair and yelled, "Boo, boo, boo." My sister tried to drag her out, but she wouldn't stop screaming at the top of her lungs, "You suck, boo!" And the final insult she got out before being pulled from the audience was spelling it out for them, B-O-O. Story 10. Unfortunately, there are a couple, but one of them would be my stepfather screaming in my face that I'm just like my mother. I can't be trusted alone with him for fear of what accusations girls like me will make. I'll never amount to anything, and I poison the family by getting siblings to hate him. I've heard this since I was 7, and the reality is that he's a classic narcissist whom the entire family walks on eggshells around. And my mother enables, but I just got the brunt of it all. That and him always being the first to point out that he wasn't my real father, which put child me through multiple loops whenever he'd scream that as an excuse for his behavior or as an insult. He'll still text occasionally to say, your hesitancy to repair things after the last argument is really concerning. You all think your priorities aren't straight. This is when the last argument was me saying, "Let's settle this. You're both right." And him screaming obscenities at me because he can't handle the feeling of being disagreed with. My priorities are my partner and my mental health, considering that for the first 2 decades of my life, I was just trying to survive my household. Story 11. My wife and I were going through a hard time and were fighting about intimacy. She said, "If you want me to be attracted to you, be attractive." I'll never forget it. It was 2,197 days ago. Now the story comes with a happy ending. I was and am an alcoholic. I remember the date she said that because that night was the last night I ever drank a drink of alcohol. After that argument, I did a lot of soul-searching and realized that while the problems weren't all on me, a lot was, and almost all my problems came from drinking. I got sober and became a better husband and father. My life is awesome. Story 12. During a very low emotional moment in my life, I opened up to my sister and disclosed some experiences where I was truly regretful of my actions. For context, the scenario I shared was not something she was involved in. She seemed understanding and supportive in the moment, but a long time later, she admitted to me that after I told her, she'd woken up the next day and felt nothing for me. The love she had for me was gone, and she was afraid it would never come back. I didn't know if it was necessarily a cruel thing to say because she didn't share it out of spite. It was just a confession of how she felt at the time, but it definitely hurt to hear and has made me very hesitant to share certain things with her ever since. I'd never considered the possibility that her love for me would ever be conditional. Story 13. My mom and I used to get into a lot of heated arguments, and one that sticks out is when she ended it by yelling that if she and my dad ever got divorced, it would be my fault. I was in middle school and it devastated my little soul. I was a quiet kid after that. They're still married and my mom and I are on much better terms. On a lighter note, my mom told me while I was in college that I was actually the reason they stayed together. I have a lot of feelings and opinions about their marriage, but they seem decently happy nowadays. It's taken me a decent amount of time to understand that I can be myself and not be hated, however. Story 14. I had a hard time with school growing up. I was diagnosed with ADHD at 30 and starting the process to see if I'm also autistic. So yes, school was rough for me. I once got yet another grade low enough that my mom had to sign it. She asked what happened, and I said the teacher wasn't good. I just didn't understand what they were teaching, which was always the case. I never really had a good teacher, just teachers who watched over the class and let me slip through the cracks every year. My mom snapped, "It's always the teachers, huh? Still don't think it's you?" Yeah, now I deal with a lifetime of always thinking, it's me. I've been working on coming to terms with the fact that my parents and the school system failed me deeply when I was growing up. There were many things going on that should have been red flags for the school to pick up on, but they never did. I wholeheartedly believe that if the school had reported some of the things to Child Protective Services, my brothers and I should have been removed from our home. I would go to school filthy and stinking and get sent to the nurse's office, and instead of ever investigating why, she just gave me a change of clothes and sent me back to class. Once I had a wounded ear, got sent to the nurse, and she didn't even ask what happened. I would pick at my lips until they were wounded and get sent to the nurse, and she'd give me a lip balm and send me back. I was always late to school and missed more days than were allowed, but my parents always had a good excuse, so they let me move on to the next grade anyway. I'd fall asleep in class, and when someone's dad was concerned and asked if I ever slept because my eye circles were so dark, I was in first grade. So yes, it was a horrible experience, and my mom just snapping, "Still don't think it's you?" was like a dagger of ice. Story 15. By a few different people, I've been told that I can't speak correctly. People have asked if I have an accent or where I'm from because of how I speak, and I've been made fun of for how I pronounce certain words. English is my first language, and I was born and raised in the US, but I'm on the autism spectrum. I couldn't speak at all until I was 4, and my parents made me get speech lessons. But didn't realize until much later that it was all because of my neurological condition. I was born in the 80s, so it wasn't a well-known thing like it is now. I gradually did learn how to speak more normally, but even as an adult, my speech has occasionally been commented on or made fun of. Story 16. There are many, but the one that hurt the most was from my mom, unintentionally. When I was growing up, my dad ended up being the source of my insecurities. He believed it wasn't the father's responsibility to care for the emotional well-being of his kids. I went through mental health treatment in my teens, and he was not present in that process whatsoever. For many years, he also made comments about my weight, starting in elementary school and into my teens, even though I was not overweight at the time. I have a lot of remaining issues due to my dad's treatment. I moved across the country in 2021, but before I did, I had a heart-to-heart with my mom. I told her that I did want to be a mother someday, but that I would have very strict boundaries with my parents and what I would and would not tolerate. I mentioned how my dad treated me and how it affected me and how afraid I was that my dad or even my mom would say something to hurt my child like they did me. She told me, "Oh, honey, he would never do that to grandkids." It hit me like a ton of bricks, honestly. Even worse, she's probably right. Story 17. I got mobbed a lot, so that will always haunt me. But my mom still occupies the top spot, and I've been carrying what she said with me for more than 20 years now. My friends annoyed and roughed up a cat. Told them to stop. Eventually, they let it go and it fled. So then I went home, feeling outraged and excited and also a little proud because I had defended the cat. I told my mom about the cat, what my friends did, and that I thought it was bad. My mother just looked at me with a disinterested look on her face and said, "And you think you're better?" I'd never harmed any animal. I love animals and always have, so I had no idea how to respond or where it even came from. It completely destroyed me. I was 11 years old and already doubting whether I even belonged in this world. Great. Another gem from her was when we were arguing some years later. Her, "Why couldn't you just be a normal child?" I don't remember the exact words here, but everything it followed was verbatim. Me, "Well, you shouldn't have birthed me then." Her, "I didn't think you'd turn out like this." Story 18. Conversation with my ex-mother-in-law. It was a Saturday afternoon. My husband Dan was out with a friend. I was home with their 2 young children who hadn't seen their father in over a week. Had been away for business the week before, went to work on Friday, went out Friday night, and left early Saturday morning. My mother-in-law called. The conversation. Mother-in-law, "Hello, is Dan there?" Me, "No, he's out with his girlfriend." I figured this was something she should know if our marriage was going to end. Mother-in-law, "You can have friends, you know." Me, "I have no issues with them having friends. It's when the friends take precedence and priority over the family that I have a problem with." Mother-in-law, "You know, all men cheat." I was shocked. I absolutely do not believe that, and if it was her life experience, it was absolutely nothing to do with me. Me, "I'm sorry you feel that way, but I don't believe that. I believe that it's a choice." Mother-in-law, this was the most heinous thing to drop from her mouth. "If you had been a better wife, he wouldn't have had to cheat on you." So she was admitting that she knew her son had been cheating on me. Let's see, and she knew this. We had 2 kids, pre-K and elementary school age. I'm disabled. I work part-time, do all the kids' activities with them, and maintain the house, yard, and cars. My husband was out of town 2 to 3 non-consecutive weeks every month, so he wasn't around much for us. Me, my clapback, mic drop moment. If he had been a better mother raising him, he would not have thought it was okay to do so. Story 19. When I was 8 years old, a kid in my class decided he didn't like me and set about making my life miserable. He stole my books and made fun of me in the playground. I was told he had a crush on me. What else is new? And to be the bigger person. This lasted until he went to the teacher and claimed I made several deeply racist remarks about him and his family. The teacher kept me after class one day while everyone else went out to recess, stood over me and asked if I had said those things. Of course, I said no and asked her who had claimed that I said them. She said, "It just seems like the kind of thing you would do." I was 8 years old. Nearly 20 years later, in a therapy session, that emerged as one of the core moments that defined my insecurity around authority figures. 8 freaking years old, and she felt the need to tell me that being a bully and a racist just seems like something I would do. I told my parents about it after the fact, and they went in and read her the riot act. I got a tearful apology, but holy hell, the damage was already done. Story 20. The month before we got married, things hit the fan with my now sister-in-law, with whom I didn't have a great relationship. I tried very hard to get along with her, but we have always had 2 very different personalities. She didn't know me very well and had only heard from others that I didn't have the best upbringing. I walked in a phone call she was having with my now husband, and she was telling him not to marry me. I heard the whole thing on speakerphone. Her reasoning? I came from a broken childhood and likely wouldn't be a healthy person to have a family with. She thought her brother deserved more. My husband and I had been together for 7 years at that point. She was upset that my husband didn't listen to her. Fast forward to the wedding. We have pictures of her sitting in the front row during our ceremony, looking extremely angry and disappointed. In addition, she stormed out of our wedding afterward while we were getting our pictures taken. The wedding took place 6 years ago. My husband and I are thriving in our marriage, have 2 beautiful children, and I know I'm married to my person. While things with my sister-in-law have improved, I don't think I'll ever fully forgive her for judging me based on my poor childhood. Things I had no control over. It was, and is, incredibly hurtful. Story 21. My mother said, "Your father did not even want you. You were atrocious as a baby and a small child. No one could stand you. You're so slow. You'll never do anything in your life. You're so lazy. I wish I didn't have kids. You weren't even born on Mother's Day. Even being born, you were being difficult." She said this to me every single year on my birthday for 40 years. She also said, "You wouldn't even lie for your own mother. You'd rather let me pass away in the gutter." This was after my stepfather caught her cheating and she wanted me to intervene. My father said, "You're just like your mother. You walk on people to get your way and don't give a crap they're suffering in your path." He said this when I told him I wanted to live with my mother after their divorce because he was drinking 24/7 and I was taking care of my sister, the house, and him, as well as my studies, all while sleeping an hour a night. My sister said, "You're so fat, I don't even understand why guys look at you. You're so fat I wouldn't wear this if I were you. It shows your hips too much." My mother said, "Your father is again the lucky one. He's gone and now everybody loves him." This was 3 days after my father ended it all. I could write a book with all these quotes. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 22. I grew up in foster care and was adopted at 17. My family had another foster girl my age who came in a couple of months before my adoption date. Her middle name was my first name. She didn't go by her middle name, but by the time I was 18 and moved out, she did. We weren't super close, but we always did things together since we were the same age, in the same grade, in a similar situation. She wanted to be like me. When I moved out, she constantly tried to get me to move back home. I refused and didn't really keep up a consistent dialogue with her. I got pregnant within 6 months of living on my own. I was excited to start a family, got engaged, and then lost the baby at 36 weeks. My family was broken up about it, as they had already thrown a baby shower and an engagement party. I did not tell my foster sister. A month after I had lost my baby, she claimed to have had a miscarriage. And I've been speaking to her, telling her details of the loss, and my mom told me this, and I lost it. I texted her that I couldn't believe she would look for attention this way while I was actually grieving the loss of a full human that I had to birth. Nobody believed her. There's no proof. She just randomly said this to my mom the day before they were coming to see me. She responded, "Your daughter deserved to pass away. I hope you get SA'd, pregnant, and lose that one too," and then blocked me. I've not seen or spoken to her since then, and this was almost 9 years ago. The last my parents knew was that she was a street worker in Austin. I have a healthy, happy 7-year-old son now. Along those same lines, my then mother-in-law said, "Don't lose this one." When I finally told her that we were expecting another baby, she was an alcoholic and my son's dad had to pull the plug on her 1 month before my son was born. She never met him. Story 23. That was my cousin's house when I was a teen with my parents, and at that point in my life, I was very much seeking approval of my artwork from everyone. Cousin's neighbor came over and I showed her the artwork I'd been doing on my iPad with my finger. She told me it was boring. My heart broke and I nearly quit art. My aunt also told me my legs were big. I've always been bottom heavy, even at 125 pounds. And I went into my mom's room and cried because I was also very self-conscious about my body. Story 24. My mom would get so flustered when I made bad grades that she called me stupid. Didn't help that I had several cousins who were academic powerhouses. My brain isn't wired for things like math. Algebra is dark magic to me. Of course, if I had stayed after school, it might have helped, like when Mrs. Smith explained how to figure out atomic numbers, which I mastered. I'm a late bloomer. What I do have is a very curious mind. I read a lot and I'm very mechanically inclined. I can do electrical, plumbing, and carpentry, but by no means am I a professional. So, to moms and dads, love your children and realize they're not all going to be doctors, like my cousins, or lawyers like my other cousins, but they'll do just fine. Story 25. My husband and I were going through a tough time, but had some good days sprinkled throughout the bad ones. Finally had a day off with him and was excited to stay in, lounge on the couch, and cook together. Our mutual friends texted us, asking if we would like to go out to a nearby bar. I replied, "No, thank you. We're going to watch football and cook soup." My husband then looked at me and said, "You're going to be mad at what I'm going to do." He proceeded to reply to the group, "I'm down for a burger. I'll see you soon," and left. I wasn't upset, just sad. When he got out of the shower and was heading to the door to leave, I looked at him and told him what he said hurt me and made me feel like he wanted to hang out with everyone but me. He replied, "Because I do," and walked out. I later found out that was the week he filed for divorce. We did 7 months of couples counseling and he still would say cruel things. I finally started to continue the divorce process today. I'll never let someone make me feel small again. I'll never be with someone who chooses everyone and himself over me. Story 26. My mother said to me, "Fight your own battles," when I was 5 years old. She also told me, "You're just like your father," which wasn't a compliment. They split up a few years after the first time she said it. When my parents split up, we had to move into my grandparents' apartment, which was in the two-family home that my cousin's parents owned. My cousin, who was 2 years older than me, told me, "Why don't you go back to where you came from?" I was 7 years old and she was smart enough not to say it in front of the adults. Years later, I made the mistake of asking that same cousin to be my maid of honor to make my grandmother happy. After my bridal shower, she made it a point to say, "You should know who shelled out for the shower." Yes, she should have known who contributed to the cost, but to phrase it in such a crass way really got under my skin. Her mother, who was a class act through and through, would have been very upset if she had heard that. I don't know why I've been her target in different ways through the years. Story 27. When I was in my early 20s, I had a difficult few years as I tried to adjust to real adult life. In a 6-month period, I got in a car accident, lost my job, and found out I needed $8,000 of dental work. I had to move back in with my mom, which wasn't ideal for either of us. We argued regularly, and she started saying she was glad I was struggling, specifically about the car accident. She said more than once, "I'm glad that happened." I'm glad you don't always have things so easy. That was fairly ridiculous, since I'd struggled with mental illness through my teens. I know I wasn't an easy kid to raise, but that made me realize she really hated me. Almost 20 years later, and I still can't fathom feeling good about something bad happening to your child or any family member. Story 28. My best friend of 17 years made a list of everything that annoyed her about me. Among the things on the list were that my depression was too much and that I always know everything because I talk a lot and have a lot of opinions. She ended by saying we could still hang out, but we had to avoid talking about anything that could be uncomfortable. That year, I was diagnosed with a chronic disease, had surgery, and my dad had to have emergency surgery. The parents held my child at home and moved to another state, but by far, the most painful thing was hearing her say all the things my depression was making me believe I was. Story 29. My mom's jokes. Every single one of them. More recently, while I was planning my wedding, she told everyone she could that I was my now husband's problem. Now that I'm pregnant with my first child, or first grandchild, she never hesitates to remind me how her pregnancy with me ruined her body and how I was a problem child long before I was born. Whenever I bring it up, she says they're just jokes, but they're not funny to me. These jokes shape my inner monologue. Lately, I've been telling her that there's no such thing as a problem child, but she tells me that there are because I was one of them. The second she pulls this with my child, she's being cut off. I'm not letting her ruin another child's life like she did mine. Story 30. I was 7 or 8 at a slumber party. I'd been told to go to sleep by a certain time, but of course, we had the TV on and we're talking. We heard the hostess's mom come up the stairs and everyone but me pretended to be sleeping. I thought there was no point in lying since I believed it was obvious we were all awake, so I didn't pretend to sleep. The mom walked in, saw I was still awake, and told me, where all my sleeping friends could hear, "Well, you're just a little rattlesnake. You talk to the doorknob. You're so talkative." Yes, I know that makes no sense. Years and years later, that mom was coming to our high school to help with a big production. I made a grumbled comment that she wasn't going to be happy to see me because she didn't like me. A friend whose mom it was demanded to know why I thought that, so I told her. She, of course, told her mom, who showed up crying at my parents' door telling my mom how sorry she was. I wasn't home. She gave my mom a tiny ceramic thing that had a Bible verse saying something like, "The fruit of thy lips are created," and begged for my and my mom's forgiveness. I really appreciated her actions in the end. It was a classy move, but the comment from my childhood lived rent-free in my head for years. Story 31. My brain protects me from cruel childhood memories by making me forget. The entire first 6 years of my life are a blank, and many family interactions I only remember vaguely, as if they're blurry and muted. One memory I recall mostly clearly is giving my mother a birthday card one year when I was about 20. My sibling and I didn't want to change the TV channel, and she got so angry she ripped the card to pieces and said, "This is what I think of your love for me. It's worthless." Then she walked away. It broke my heart, and I instantly burst into sobs. She was a very angry person, and I never thought she would change. Then one time she worked herself up so much that she thought she was having a heart attack and had to call an ambulance. She seemed different after that, and when I made a comment about it, she clarified, "No, I just stopped caring about you. It makes life easier." That was another jab to the heart. I stopped trusting her emotionally. She never apologized for all she put us through, but the above comment was probably a lie and she only said it to hurt me. She did improve after that, and she tried to make amends by providing for us in different ways, like taking us on vacation, cooking great meals, and obsessing with us over TV shows. The following years had many amazing memories, and she never reverted back to that verbally cruel schmuck. While I had purposely forgotten a lot and never forgave her for the miserable years I was 6 to 20, but I have let it go because it was tiring to carry the resentment and anger around. It's been 20 years since the birthday card incident, and guess who has stopped caring, so life is easier. That's not true, I do care a little, but I've lived abroad far away from her for over a decade and never plan on returning to her city. Any future kids won't meet her either because while she isn't cruel, mean, or petty anymore, she has narcissistic tendencies and I don't want them exposed to her. Story 32. You're useless. Absolutely worthless. My dad said this to me when I was 17, very casually and out of nowhere at dinner. When I told him it hurt my feelings, he replied, "It's okay." I called the dog useless too. Usually he says things in anger, so this one hurt a lot. I didn't realize I was mistreated until a friend noticed how scared I was of men, because my dad was my only male relative and told me it wasn't normal. I feel so lucky to now have a fiancé who's so calm and never shouts at me. Never tears me down emotionally, and I'm grateful for him taking a chance on me and being patient when I was so nervous around men. Story 33. The overall story is long and depressing, and I don't want to get into it, but it involves the time my wife and I were splitting up. I don't think my child was trying to be cruel. They're not a cruel person. I just don't think they understood how their helpful comment would impact me. When I explained that I would be moving out, one of my kids, who's 19 and non-binary, said, "You better get started on looking. I've heard it can be really hard finding an apartment, so you should get on it now." I didn't react because I felt like all the life had been sucked out of me at a time when I already thought all life was gone. I looked back into my room, closed the door, and sobbed for the better part of an hour. Story 34. I've had 3 comments that have stuck with me, all told by me to the men closest to me. When I was 18, my brother said, "If you look at yourself long enough in the mirror, you'll realize you're not as beautiful as you think you are." My husband, while I was 5 months pregnant with our first child at the age of 19, said, "Now I understand why they call the first wife the ugly practice wife." Nothing prompted this comment. We were just watching a show and I simply looked over and smiled at him. My husband, again, yes, the same one, roughly 15 years later, said in the middle of our conversation, "You remind me of a coconut. I hate coconuts." Again, this was completely random and had absolutely nothing to do with the normal conversation we were having. Good times. Story 35. Who's he? He's not invited. I was 6 years old. A classmate and friend had invited me to go to an amusement park with his family and some other friends. I was so excited because I'd never been to an amusement park before, but the ones I saw on TV looked magical. When we arrived at his house just across the street from the school, his mom was there along with some other kids. As we got to the door, the mom pointed at me and said those cruel words. I was devastated and walked home, crying all the way. I lived a block up the street. I was too young to realize that an outing like that needed pre-planning and permission from my parents. My friend, when he invited me, was unaware of that too. He just wanted me to join him. I think the mother could have been more sensitive, given my underdeveloped level of emotional maturity and understanding of the world at that tender age. I don't think I've ever felt so betrayed, dismayed, or humiliated. Story 36. I'm your father, and if you can't listen, you're done. Gone. Pack your stuff. Mom isn't going to help you. I was 17, almost 18, and lived with my mom. My dad hadn't been a genuine figure in my life for years. He was in the military, working overseas, retired, and then went to overseas again. My mom was basically a single mother and had neighbors who helped. He came back, I don't remember why, and tried to march into my room. I told him he couldn't do that. Even Mom doesn't do that. She knocks and waits because she knows that if she doesn't, I'll do the same to her and her partner. He started yelling at me, but I blocked the door with my body, which worked surprisingly well because a wall from my jutting out closet was right in front of the door. I had a few things that helped me, and I texted Mom, who said she'd handle it. I don't remember what happened after, but he dropped it later that day and didn't mention it. My parents kept arguing for the rest of his stay, and he left sometime after. I haven't seen him since, but his attitude towards me has gone better with time, as has my mom's now that I don't have to see her deranged now fiancé. I usually suck at remembering important details in my life. I think I have memory issues because of cruelty when I was younger, and I've repressed a lot of things. Therapy was a coin toss, but during school, it helped for a while. I can still freeze when I hear angry footsteps or people yelling, and I used to lock myself in bathrooms often because it was the only room with a lock. My pets were my reason to live for a while when I was younger. I'm doing better now, even memory-wise, and I'm eating more. But nearing my teenage years, I didn't have parents. I had roommates who were related to me. The school I was at, my extracurriculars, and my friends were more like family to me for a while. Story 37. My 8th grade class had a weekend field trip to Washington, D.C. that lasted from Thursday night to Sunday evening. My mom was one of her chaperones. By the evening return trip, some of the kids on my bus were out of spending money. No one was in danger or going hungry, but I actually had money to burn. A few other friends decided to pull some cash and get a mid-sized horde of gas station snacks, and a bus-wide tournament of I Spy and Slug Bug was planned for all 40 kids. My mom saw me walking back to the entire crowd of kids waiting for a roll call outside her bus as 3 other friends and I were packing snacks for the road trip tournament. She said, "I'm putting you on Weight Watchers the hot second we get home." It was as if I was planning on tearing into enough Doritos to commit a war crime all by myself. Thanks, Gloria. For the record, I didn't say one word to anyone for the rest of the trip. I just hid my face under my hoodie and pretended to sleep because, unfortunately, I had mastered the art of sobbing in perfect silence and stillness well before junior high. She remembers my kind-heartedness and generosity in buying snacks for my friends who couldn't afford them, but there's absolutely no memory of humiliating me in front of my entire class. That was 25 years ago, and I'm carrying that memory with me to my grave. Story 38. I know you will never amount to anything. This was spoken to me by my mother when I was a freshman in college. I was having difficulties figuring out what to major in and was struggling academically because of the terrible high school education I had received. For example, I had to take several remedial math classes to get to the level I should have been at if I had gone to anywhere other than the crap high school I attended. Essentially, I had to do high school math all over again. I was trying to express my frustration to her, and that was her response. It wasn't too long after that I became a college dropout and also went no contact with her. 10 years later, I did get a software engineering degree and had a 30-year career that ended with me as a systems architect. I retired early at 54 so my wife and I could travel the world. Story 39. I was waiting at a bus stop after school and a girl from another school just approached me and said, "Heck, you're ugly." Several years later, I was at a party. I'd grown my hair long and probably looked a lot less awkward. I noticed this girl was following me around like a lost lamb. Then she spoke to me, and that voice, that moment, came flooding back. I knew I recognized her from somewhere, and what she said to me at that bus stop never left me. Just turned and walked away when I heard that voice. I never saw her again. The fact that she seemed interested in me didn't really help my self-esteem. When I was single, that moment continually played throughout my head. I just seemed to fall into relationships and never really did much chasing. Thankfully, since I lacked the confidence to take the shot. Story 40. When I was 14, I was head over heels for a girl I had been dating for about a year. We were childhood sweethearts since primary school. Towards the end, she started getting really cold, distant, and weird. She was constantly texting and talking about a girl she had met online. One day, she seemed upset. So in a very tender and concerned way, I asked her what was wrong. She snapped back, "I'm trying to work out if you're genuinely that stupid." It was so unprovoked, it took me totally by surprise. Still remember the anger in her eyes. She looked like she really meant it. That look and those words will be burned into my mind forever. It's the meanest thing anyone has ever said to me. Story 41. My father once told me that everything I touch turns to crap, to the point my own mother doesn't even want me, never did. She knew what you were going to be, disappointing and uninspiring. My father is an anesthesiologist for one of the largest networks in the Northeast, and I'm a photojournalist. I like art and creativity, and I'm terrible at math, so I was never going to follow in his footsteps. He thinks the arts are stupid and that people who believe art evokes emotion have a lower intelligence. My IQ is over 100. I have many accomplishments in my field, and I've been recognized as a profound photographer with awards. If you asked him today, he'd tell you I didn't even graduate high school. But that is incorrect. He just sucks, man. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.